He's Jeff.
And he's Michael.
And that's totally corny.
Good morning, sir. How are you today?
Good. Looking at my long hair compared to how I look in that open, like,
well,
nice.
Definitely a different look for you. I got to admit that. So.
Well, going back to my high school days, I had a long hair, not the whole time, but for part of it. And let's not get distracted by the length of my hair. Good to see you, Jeff. Okay. Good to see you, my friend.
Yes, looking forward to our time this morning again.
Yeah. So, as is usual, we picked some topics, and you had two topics you wanted to pick, and I was going to lean the other way, but producer Gina was like, "Well, I think we should talk about this," and so the topic we're talking about it was selected by producer Gina, and the other topic we can talk about another time. I do want to, and I'm not going to tell everybody what that other one was, but so. Because the reason I was open to talking about this is because I don't know. We'll see where it goes. I know you have some thoughts that you want to, expound upon, and I have some thoughts that may take it in a different direction. We shall see. So,
like most of our conversations,
inevitably,
it always aligns.
we always right. God is guiding this conversation. Let's just say, He is in our midst. Where two or more are gathered, He's guiding it. So, let's see where God guides our discussion today. What are we talking about today, Jeff?
Well, there was a news story that was brought to my attention.
Wait. Hold on.
Go ahead.
I gotta say hi, everybody in the comment section. Right, we got an audience here. Sorry, you guys. A bunch of them are jumping over from Bible every morning, where I do prior to this, and saying hi. So good to see you all in the comment section. All right, as you were.
So there was a story in the news picked up by a number of sources where the scenario, the best I can understand it from the description given, is a delivery driver comes up, drops off a package at a man's house. As he's walking away, hears what he perceives to, or hears a racist comment come out of the house's Ring doorbell system. It's actually not a Ring doorbell system, but we're going to call it that just because everybody knows what that is.
Like Kleenex, right?
Yeah.
Like Kleenex is the brand name. Exactly. Ring is the brand name. Right. It's a doorbell
goes
system.
Away, reports it to his supervisor somewhere at work, and then Amazon goes in and shuts down all of the smart services that they operate in this man's house. And so, there's this fellow who's in his house, and now he can't use his refrigerator and blender and Alexa and all this stuff, which is the way he interacts with his smart devices. And so, the interesting backstory in all of this is that, one, I think the guy was even the fellow who owned the house wasn't even home at the time. And I don't think anybody was home at the time. And only by having other video cameras and listening devices around could he demonstrate that he didn't say this. And so, kind of a couple of things that I find interesting is that here Amazon has the capacity to shut down these services that are running inside your house. And
let's back up a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
So sure. I don't know if this is the case for the audience, but you froze for a second, and I just want to make sure, in case it froze for everybody else, it was rotoed a little bit. The guy wasn't even home, and insisted that he didn't make this comment, right? That the delivery guy perceived, he heard something, and perceived it as a racial slur and reported it. And then when all of this happened, the guy's like, "What? Why'd this happen?" And said, "No, I didn't," and was able to demonstrate it. Right? He was able to demonstrate or prove his case that he didn't, because of other devices that were recording, and he could prove that never was uttered. It was essentially a misperception by the delivery guy or something.
Right. And there's a lot of little details in there that the delivery guy was wearing earbuds, and there's nobody. I mean, there's a whole lot of interesting backstory to that people can kind of go in and investigate. But it's like, that just to me was a kind of a troubling scenario that Amazon can shut down all of this stuff inside the house. And I mean, is this just, they're providing the service, they can revoke the service anytime they want? Do you have this expectation that since I've paid my fees, I'm going to get this? can you lose it all because, or do you just lose it until you've proven that you didn't do it? Or are you presumed in it? I mean, there's a whole bunch of just interesting things that kind of are counter to the way we do things in the United States. You're presumed innocent until guilty, and here he's guilty until he could prove that he was innocent. And what happens if it happened at my house where I just have the Ring doorbell, but not the extra audio and surveillance stuff that can demonstrate that I wasn't there? You know, what do you do with that? So these are just kind of I thought it would be kind of fun to just hash this out for a little while this morning.
Essentially, it's the he said, she said argument, right? I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Yes. So we live in a country, presumably our legal system, our entire infrastructure of dealing with one another in civility and policing and the judicial system is based on you are innocent until proven guilty.
Mhm.
And so, the legal minds, the forefathers, the founding fathers, the people who established that, some of the argumentation was a lot. It's better that 10 guilty people go free than one innocent person be convicted. Right. That's the legal kind of argument. We have to, in such a system, we have to be okay with that. And one of the arguments was it's not just 10. It's better that 100 guilty people go free than one innocent person be convicted. And it's like, for us, it's like, are you kidding? No, those guilty people. But imagine the innocent person, right? The innocent person. So that's our system. Except now it's kind of flipped on its head, or it's kind of, there's something that's circumventing the legal code, right? It's the consumer, when you click that continue or that okay when you're logging in or you're signing up for an app or a service, and here's our bylaws, and here's our, you have to agree to all this, and you have to read this 50-page volume or whatever.
Well,
right,
people read, so
right, very few of all the small print, and within that it's like we reserve the right to do whatever we want with our product at any time or whatever. And so that is, when our lives become more and more enmeshed with technology, that's where those things cross over, right? There's the legal right, but then there's the company's right to do whatever they want.
Well, yeah, and that aspect, I was reading some of the comments below, and somebody goes, well, if I bought a toaster, it doesn't matter whether I'm racist or not. I own the toaster. I get to make toast with it. So we're saying, yeah, but they're buying a service from Amazon, and Amazon is free to provide their service, to provide the terms and conditions for what it is. And immediately in my mind, I don't know if you've seen the movie Remember the Titans. It's one of my favorite movies in spite of the historical inaccuracies in it. But there's this scene where, the football team, who's, got some of the white guys off the team, some of the black guys off the team, go into this eating establishment, and the guy's up there, he goes, well, I reserve the right to refuse service to whoever. The right to refuse service became the mechanism for discriminating against people. And so, even if Amazon does have that right, we need to be, how do we keep that from being a mechanism to discriminate against people who have a different political viewpoint, to things that are okay as far as our Constitution says, that in fact our Constitution protects this sort of differences, which now corporations can enforce this kind of moral code or behavior code, if you will. And, Amazon's just big enough. They've got a kind of I don't want to say monopoly, but they've got a huge reach that can affect some of these sorts of things. If you got locked out of using Amazon, there's a large segment of our culture that you can't interact with, because that's the way people do stuff these days.
Yeah, I mean, the allure or the selling point of incorporating all of this technology into your life is to make your life better, right? Easier, more convenient, and fun, and like at the snap of a finger, like, clap on, clap off, right? Like, I don't have to get up to turn on the light. I can just clap on. And that's like voice commands. And that is the future, right? As technology is not going to go in the other direction. It's only going to get better, worse, whichever. It's
Or
only going to
sophisticated, no matter what's going to happen.
more sophisticated, right? There's the neutral term. It's going to get more sophisticated and more mind-boggling, and it's just going to continue. And so these kinds of issues are going to come up. And I wonder if this case of this guy sent shockwaves through Amazon, right? It was Amazon. I wonder if it registered in the corporate level, and they then gave directives, say, oh, we need to make sure this doesn't happen again, or if it was just like, okay, whatever, the cost of doing business, we had to deal with this guy. I wonder, because imagine if it had been, even further, like his doors. I know he had a bunch of technology that was linked together, but I don't know to what extent. But would it, like if his electric vehicle were connected and his door locks were connected and all this, like this guy could have been completely shut out. He could have found himself in a situation where his very life was at risk,
Right.
and his technology was shut down because of a glitch. I'll call this a glitch, a misheard and misreported. Right, it's actually the human. It was the human, the human capacity, or the human, a human aspect, but it wasn't. It was still the human factor that caused this shutdown.
I mean, yes and no. It's the automation was what allowed the glitch, if you will, to become so large, though.
Right.
And so it's kind of I wholeheartedly agree that it's the technology is going to do what we tell it to do. I mean, the technology's out there thinking, ooh, I don't like this guy, or, oh, this guy was nice. The technology just doesn't do that. It's not thinking.
Right.
It's a hammer, a very sophisticated hammer at the end of the day. The people made the decisions, but there's also the way we are doing things allows small mistakes to have large consequences now. And, I mean, if I give my kid a little toy hammer, they're going to go out, pound on things. The toy hammer just can't do much. If I now give them a drill gun, that's a problem. So to me, this is not about, oh, is technology good or bad? And, I think, we've had enough discussions that we have a little different vision of how the technology may play out in the future, but technology is something we're going to use, and we're either going to use it well or we're going to use it poorly. The question is, what kind of people are we becoming, and are we doing the things that recognize what's coming forward? Are we maturing so that when the bigger technologies come in place, we can use them well? And this may just be a blip on the map, and people say, oh, this is bad, we don't want to let this happen. Or it could be, these are the policies we're instituting, and this is just going to become more commonplace, and there are people that are just going to have to suck it up and deal with it.
Well, yeah, well, a question that occurs to me is, what if the guy did say something, right? I mean, he's proven that he didn't. But what if it's a case where the guy did say something? Is it still right for the business to shut down his life without going through a legal channel, right? That's kind of where civil governments versus international corporations, right? It's like in some countries, absolutely, right? You have a social credit score that's all technologically controls your life, right? That's what's in development, right? If in China, the technological, I don't know, interference, or the technological, the ubiquity of technology is expansive. It's much more expansive there, at least I think in the big cities, in the developed areas, than it is here, right? It's top down. It's the government is imposing certain technological standards on culture, rather than from the ground up, things being developed and people inventing and using them and trying them out, and then government policy being instituted once technology moves ahead of the establishment of legislation, et cetera. And so the laws will always be behind this kind of stuff, but it's an inevitability.
Well, but you raise a good point. I mean, I think racist comments are bad. I think being racist is a bad idea. One of the things our country's kind of founded on is there is a freedom of speech and what you can say and what you can think. And, you know,
And
there's
want
always
that to remain. You want
yeah,
that
there's
to
always
remain.
been this odd mix of, do we really want that or not? But if you don't allow people to disagree, that's going to be, there's no scenario in the history of the world that we've studied where enforcing uniform or getting rid of freedom of speech has played out well for the average person. And so, you know, yeah, I think a racist comment is bad, but, you know, let's just say, you know, the guy was, as he's walking away, oh, that guy's, you know, he is a racist and he made a comment while he was walking away. So I'm not talking about something that's directed at the delivery driver, because now, you know, in the function of his job, you're subjecting them to racist, you know, that's a different set. But, you know, just kind of as he's walking away, passing comment, overheard. Should a corporation be able to say anything about that? Yeah, I don't know if you remember a few years back, the owner of the Clippers was recorded talking with his wife and said something like that. And yeah, it was reprehensible comment, but why should I would hesitate to think if what my wife and I said, where I'm unguarded and say
In
something
private.
in private, where I'm kind of thinking through things, if that now becomes public and I can be judged on that, that's just going to destroy relationships, because now I have to be guarded all the time. I can never actually be vulnerable with somebody. So there's, you know, I don't even know what to do with that, but I guarantee that's not the direction we want to go.
Right. And I mean, probably one of the, I don't know, strongest arguments, or this is something that's just remained with me, that one of the arguments for freedom of speech, you want the crazies to speak up. Right. You want the crazies, the people who have wrong think, right? The people whose minds are going in the wrong direction. You want them to be able to freely utter what they believe, so that you can see who they are and where they are, and that they can be countered publicly, right? That they can be shot down, or their arguments can be refuted. Because if they are if they feel that they can't speak openly, they're still going to harbor those things. They're still going to believe those things. They're not going to hear contrary arguments, and it's going to manifest into something worse, right? Though you want to be able to pinpoint the crazies, so you stay away from them, right? If people are just telling you what you want to hear, or what they know is acceptable or appropriate, then we're not going to know what evil really lurks. For example, I mean, YouTube, you know, here on YouTube, I hesitate every time in normal conversation talking about history. I have to hesitate every time I think I want to talk about Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. It's like, just right now, saying those words on YouTube, I'm programmed in my mind, because of YouTube's suppression of information. In my mind, I'm programmed. I'm like, are they going to flag this video now that I said the name of a historic character and a historic political party from a horrible time in history? It's like, if you suppress the ability to say those things, you literally erase history, and that's how history repeats, right? You suppress the information from being openly discussed, then people don't know why Hitler did what he did. And then when it happens again, people don't see it. They don't recognize it happening, because they're ignorant by the suppression. I mean,
well, there's that's a great point. And there's kind of two thoughts that come to my mind as we're discussing this. One is that, you know, thoughts always, actions speak louder than words, that we're kind of, it seems like we're getting to a place where there's just this off limits language, where language really is, it's a way of people expressing who they are. And one of the problems I have with politics today is that we're kind of getting to it seems to me we've gotten to a place where, as long as people say the right stuff, we're in good shape. Whether they actually believe it and do that is irrelevant. And so we're not a people who look at what are the actions, what do people do, and we evaluate on their character instead of what they've said. Because good character people can say mistaken things, and if we get all over them for that, we're missing that they're people of good character. And people who are bad character can say all the right things, and we don't want that. So it's
right.
The other part is, I'm a scientist, and if you now can or can't talk about certain things, the way science advances is somebody come up and say, yeah, I think everybody thinks 99% of the scientists think this is right, but this is a better way. And you want that voice to be heard, because those are often, there's a whole lot of those that are wrong, but most of the right came out of that group as well.
Isn't that where most scientific breakthroughs come through? It's like,
Exactly.
here's this obscure little idea this guy had that ended up being, oh, yeah, that's the truth. And people were fighting against him. No, that's not how the way it's done. And then it turns out to be absolute truth. And everybody, and it's only a generation of those who believe the wrong things dying off for the thing to really take hold, right? I mean, that's
that's the way it works. Yeah. Well, and quite out, you can go look at Einstein. I mean, here he is. He develops his equations of that govern general theory of relativity, and he sees, they predict a dynamic and expanding universe, or expanding or contracting. And so prevalent was the idea that the universe was static that he said, here's the way to do this. And so he introduced this thing that had no physical basis, except that's what everybody thought, to make a static universe. And had he, going back and trying to assess it, but in retrospect, it's easy to look back, but you could make an argument that if he had just trusted his equations instead of what the zeitgeist, if you will, that we live in a static universe, he would have predicted that we live in an expanding or contracting universe. So
right.
If
he stuck to his instinctive brilliance, like in looking at the information, he never would have introduced the cosmological constant. The cosmological constant was the zeitgeist of his peer group and his people group. And he's like, well, everybody believes that in the static universe, I have to introduce this thing to make that fit into what I'm. Anyway, we're getting in the weeds a little bit for people here, but I want to take this in a slightly different direction in the last few minutes. So this technological advancement, it was Amazon devices, right? It's this guy who's all his stuff were linked through Amazon. And so it's this corporation, Amazon, that's making this decision. And it's a tech company, and Amazon's not the only tech company, right? There's other tech companies doing similar things, competing products, and then trying to come up with the next greatest thing that people are going to buy, et cetera. And so that's an inevitability. And because, of the zeitgeist of the time that, saying a racist thing makes you evil and no longer worthy of our product, right? I envision a time when a tech company, let's say Elon Musk as an example, as proof of concept of what I'm talking about here. So you have, the big tech companies, from one political point of view is like, they're all woke and they're all going, this one direction, and they're all, suppressing certain types of speech, etc. And then Elon Musk comes along and says, well, I think freedom of speech, right? No suppression of speech, freedom of speech. I'm going to buy this giant thing that I can afford. And it was a paradigm shift, not just for the company, Twitter, or now called X, but a paradigm shift for all tech companies that were going in that direction. It's like, and so I envision a time when Elon Musk, not godly, but it was a paradigm shift toward freedom of speech. But I envision a time when a Christian or a Christian organization, a Christian company is big and influential, and this kind of thing would never happen, and your life is only getting better through technology, because we tend to be paranoid of technology. But what if it's just it doesn't mean just because there's corruption at the highest levels in an organization, say government, doesn't mean government should be thrown out, period, right? Because God instituted civil government, right? It's his invention, right? He and so imagine a godly tech company that's bigger than all the other tech companies, right? What a world that will be. And I think it's an inevitability.
No, it's an interesting point. Even beyond you're casting the stone down a few rapids
generations,
throwing it here, but in some sense, here you've got these large tech companies that you could make an argument, they're all politically motivated and they're trying to advance stuff. I think you could also make an argument that just from a business perspective, this made more sense, so they went this way. And then you've got somebody who comes in with a different viewpoint that says, wait a second, instead of narrowing what we can say, let's allow people to say things that's a better way. And by being able to show that that's marketable, if you will, you can actually influence what may have been just kind of a local minima that people got into for whatever reason economically. And, and then beyond that, just saying, well, if Christianity really works as we say it does, it will have that capacity that we can get into these places where it's like, okay, we're restricting things and that's not bad. But if we run things and do things and live the way God has instructed us, it is the best way to live. There is no best for society, better for society than the way God has done things. And so by implementing that, you can allow people to see a bigger vision of what could be. I think that's an interesting concept.
All right, Jeff, how smart is your life? Speaking you're one of the smartest, like arguably smartest, from the world's point of view, right? You are in a very small group that speaks a particular language, right? Astrophysicists, there's a small group. I don't mean that. I mean technologically, how linked up is your house? Could Amazon shut you out? Like how smart is what I mean. You have the smartphone, the smart refrigerator. How would Amazon or whatever shutting down affect you? Would you be inconvenienced?
At this point, I have actively avoided doing a lot of smart stuff. I don't know whether
Can I coach you. I'm an astrophysicist. I've avoided doing smart stuff.
Yeah, there's one of those accurate.
Pull that out of context.
Don't reflect what I said. But I mean, I just personally don't do that. One, I don't want to have a lot of my personal information out there, not because I have anything to hide, just because I'm not entirely sure it'll be used well. And I'm a little more cautious in that. I mean, I have a phone, I have a car. I mean, there's lots of technology that I use, but I try and limit the amount of public information or private information that becomes stored in some company as a result of that. So I probably have more smart stuff than I would choose to do just because it's somewhat impossible to avoid, but I try not to do a lot of that. So
can you adjust the temperature of your refrigerator from your phone while you're at the office?
No, there's actually a dial inside my refrigerator that I have to use. So
I mean, physically walk up to it and do it. Yeah.
There's a lot of that for me that is less about, is the technology bad, but more it's like, okay, so as I'm helping my kids grow and as we're doing things, does adopting the smart technology help my family live well? And so that's really what's driving my thought behind it. Not so much, ooh, somebody might be watching me. Right. It's these are the things where I was taught how to, you pay attention to what's in the refrigerator and check things and monitor things, because that's how you become aware and can keep bigger problems from happening. And so I want those things to happen so that my kids see me dealing with the problems that show up, so they learn how to. It's really much more about helping my kids grow up and be mature adults than it is avoiding the technology at this point.
And I think the government, or from the government's side of things, that the government needs to make sure the environment allows for people to make their own decision at what end of this continuum they're at, right? For example, my dad has never owned a computer, has never owned a smartphone, does not have TV right now. I mean, he has a VCR. He literally has a VCR, right? A wall full of VHS tapes, right? And my dad is off the grid, literally, technically, right? He doesn't even have his own electricity. He's stealing it from his neighbor. His neighbor knows, but like my dad is as off. He's at one end of that continuum, right? And then at the other end of the continuum is everything in your life is connected and convenient, and and there's an efficiency to it, right? The government needs to stay out of that and let people decide, rather than you must do this, you have to get an electric car, and et cetera, et cetera. All right, we're actually out of time. We've got 10 seconds left. Jeff, why don't you last few words, give to our audience?
I would just say, whatever we're going to do with this technology, we need to make sure we're developing people of character who know how to use it well, whether they choose to avoid it, whether they choose to embrace it, that people can choose to live lives of character so that we actually care and take care of the people around us.
Amen. Love you, brother. Good to see you. See you next time. Bye, everybody.